All right. Here's our next installment of drawing the Statue of Liberty. While I wait for some simulations to run. Okay. I've had a little more rest this time, so this should be, I can already tell like I'm in much better shape than I was last time. There we have the seams on the arm. The first part. So I'll have to go back and include some highlights for this part on the arm to show that there are some rivets. This will do for now. Okay. The shape of the arm isn't quite coming through just because all the lines that need to be there are not there yet. And so there's a very subtle gradient from the inner portion of the forearm to the outside. That's currently not getting captured. I'm just going to turn up the brightness here on my lighting. That's a bit better. Here I'm just measuring out the bottom part of the chin. Okay, the fabric I'll get to in a moment, but I want to get the crown taken care of first. Yeah, so I'll clean up some of the outlines. Thank you. Yes. And I do like Mayday Parade quite a bit, so that style of music is going to be playing in the background for better or worse. Yes, hello. Getting some of the shading in around the brow, just under the brow. And the hair kind of splits up around there. There's a very clear division between the hair and the forehead, fortunately. So I can almost just shade that in, at least for now. Cross hatch it a little bit, then I'll run over it with a blending stump later. Yeah, this comes around, that's in shadow. And the curls are in shadow around this area. I'll kind of block that out a little bit. So several interesting curls. Okay, yeah, this feels a lot smoother compared to whatever I was doing last time, just simply because I'm more rested this time around. Okay. And the shadow under the chin is relatively well defined right here. Relatively dark, and it really sharpens towards the chin there. And then there's a secondary reflection that comes under the other side of the chin, so I'm keeping this side kind of light. And there's an entire arc that's in shadow here. Okay, so I'll add some more subtle contours that help with better defining that shape. The transition on the chin towards the cheek on this side is smoother. So at some point I'll go through with a blending stump and soften that transition. Kind of like this. Already you can see the shape has improved significantly. The illusion of having a contour has improved. Make the chin a bit more defined. This is very tricky because faces are just the human mind is so good at picking up the most subtle differences in faces, that I'll definitely have to go through this with another pass. It's probably fine for now. The nose has a very clean contour like that. A little bit higher. Yeah, there we go. And then we have a bit of shading on the side of the nose there. Yeah, so I'll refine that nose as I go along. Okay. So that's not bad. All right, so yeah, the hard part is just going to be separating out these window sections, because it's not just, yeah, the window sections have this curve to them all the way around. So capturing that's just just yet another challenge as part of this portrait. And of course, I say that as much as a good thing as it is kind of a barrier. Good because it's a good challenge. Barrier because it's difficult. That's just how portraits are. Okay, so the cut in the hair starts around here, goes in the shadow. Very clean cut like that. I'm trying to capture both the shadows into these windows on the crown, but also trying to give a sense of the shape of the windows themselves. And of course, one informs the other. It's not like they're mutually exclusive, but I'm just describing what I'm doing out loud. Okay, so this could probably come on a little bit more. Okay, that's one window, the adjacent window. Gotta keep including that very subtle curve. Very difficult to capture. So there's on one side. We have another one splitting. This and then so I'm just resizing the windows a little bit. So that'll have to be refined, but what I'm trying to do is just block off the correct number of windows with approximately the correct widths, and then I'll come back, and then I've kind of decided on the fly that I'll come back and refine them as needed. This part of the crown is really, there we go. One more on this side of the grid. One kind of intersecting that boundary, and then one more little window as the crown tapers. Okay. And some of these windows I'm going to try to make them line up a little bit better. Yes, So this window's positioned pretty well, very nicely. And the margins are just so tight that, I mean, even the slightest little smudge makes the windows look kind of deformed. And that's just another challenge involved in all of this. Okay. I have to make some decisions about how to shade the windows themselves. And I'll explain that out loud as I get to them. Okay, this has more of a curve on it. Let's see, at least for now, yeah. So for these windows on the side, I can more, they're all in shadow, so I can really just shade them in as they are. It solves that problem. These windows, the curves all have to be uniform. The widths, they are, it turns out they're, looks like they're non-uniform, so I need to make sure they taper in width correctly. Okay. There's a bit of hair just above that portion. There's also more hair down here. They kind of curve up and then around to the other side. The bottom portion of the crown here is very dark. The top portion of the crown is in the shadow of both this thorn and the next one. So this thorn, I drew it a bit too thick. So narrow it down. Here, this thorn starts right around here. And notice that I'm adjusting the position of the paper so that it's more easy to draw straight lines. And I could use a ruler for this, nothing wrong with that. But just for secret, you know, just bragging rights with myself, I know that if I look at this in the future and I don't use a ruler, I can tell myself, yeah, I did that without a ruler. But if I did use a ruler, that would be no problem. It really would not be a problem. Okay, so this thorn is a bit thinner. Seems just about right. portion. I need to make this guy just a little bit thinner. Yeah. Okay. Looks like the thorns actually have kind of a wide base that does narrow in. It's not just a straight thorn. It actually seems like it starts off like one width and then it decreases. So I'll have to be mindful of that when I actually finish the thorns here. Yeah. This thorn feels a bit thin, but I think that's going to be okay. Yeah. Yeah, it's just barely okay. All right, and this one. Just about where I sketched it. And to draw straight lines, you can just kind of trace out the shape that you want. Pretty standard drawing technique. And I think, yeah, pretty happy with how that's positioned. And then the next one, right about where I sketched it in. Yeah, something like that. Let the tip narrow in. Erase the excessive graphite. There we go. Good. And the final one, this also is right about where it needs to be. Maybe a little bit lower. Okay. And the bottom portion of this thorn is not quite flat. It has a bit of a rise. It does rise just a little bit. Again with that very, very subtle tapering. Somehow that looks, yeah, I want the angle to be just a little bit lower. And yeah, I can make that go to the closer to the edge there. There we go. Okay. So there we have our thorns on the crown. And here I'm noticing I need to straighten this one out a little bit. It was like curved in on this edge. Okay. Just add a little bit of shading. And then these are, and I guess it's copper, but it is very, the shading on the thorns are incredibly uniform. So I'll have to try and capture that. And that's pretty typical of just general flat surfaces. Uniform shading on flat surfaces is can be kind of hard to capture. Okay. And something else that's kind of missing is the fact that, yeah, there's this edge at the top of the crown kind of blends in towards the end there, but this gives me an idea of what to shade in. So it's the so all of this is in shadow. Okay, and then there's portions of this crown that's not in shadow. So that's like here. Actually, I could make that a little bit bigger. There's portion not in shadow there. There's a shadow from the crown that casts very obliquely there and kind of there. That one's harder to capture. So the curve on the windows is very, very subtle and therefore hard to kind of to show very clearly. But I'm trying. And then I need to adjust the height of these windows because that space between the window and where that edge is, it's more or less uniform as we go around the top of the crown, the top portion of the crown. So let me adjust. Well, I'll adjust that with, so let's just use 6B right away for some of these. So 6B certainly here. Giving the hair a little bit more volume. Give the shape, the head a bit of a contour. Yeah, so that should be fine. Let's continue with the 6B on the windows here. And as I do this, another nice thing about art or drawing is that you can adjust on the fly. So I noticed that, for example, the second window from the left was a bit too big, so I drew it a little bit smaller with the 6B. Okay, and then this opens up nicely to this shape. And then the next window. So here in this window, there's just a touch more shadow. So I drew that in. Yeah, for this shadow to really look like a shadow, I need to make that a bit straighter. That's probably good enough for now. And here, this window leans in a little bit more. its shadow doesn't go all the way to the bottom. But the glass itself was a bit, yeah, there's a dark shade to it. Okay. There's the next one. And then now we're at the boundary of the square. And there is a bit of a glare in the window, this window, but we will leave that out, at least for now. The next one. There we go. Yeah, it's going to bother me a lot that these are not as uniform as they could or should be. But it's an important thing about drawing it, at least for me. Like I don't know how normal what I'm about to say is, because I'm only self-taught. But I just have to, at some point I just have to keep moving forward. Especially with something like this that's for something or someone. That has some kind of delivery time. It's an informal delivery time, and I don't feel particularly rushed, but I certainly only have finite time in general. And it would just be a lot simpler for me if I got this done sooner rather than later, and not get unnecessarily hung up on details. And of course, it takes a while to figure out which details are more important or less important. But that's why in my own time I let myself make a lot of mistakes. Because the fact is that I really only learn if I let myself make mistakes and kind of explore. And by making mistakes in a more private setting, it means that I can avoid making mistakes in much bigger contexts, much more, high pressure, higher expectation contexts. Yeah, so this thorn has its shadow extends a little bit like that. Kind of this entire thing ends up going under shadow for the most part, at least this portion. And I'll very gently crosshatch that bottom portion of the crown. Okay, so not the best, but I can always come back to this. I'll go over this one more time. I'll define this edge a bit more strongly just to make it clear that there is an edge. So there is a lower edge. Okay, yeah, that makes it a bit clearer what the shape of the crown looks like. For the head, I'll shade in the most obvious shadows here once again, this time with, this is 4B, yeah. And this portion, this shadow ends right around halfway. Yep, we have that. Okay, so this is another important decision I need to make here. How much detail in the hair do I include? And right now I'm thinking I will blend, mostly blend, and then throw in very, very subtle hints of the contours of the hair with an H. Okay, so the blending, I need to make sure that the blending is consistent with the hair. Okay, and the hair, there are parts of it that are deeper in shadows than others. Of course, this portion to the lower right of me will be deeper in shadow. Okay, and there's that bit under shadow. And then we have that last curl, bottom of that last curl over here. Okay, and then the nice thing about the hair here is that most people don't, you know, they don't have this internal image of exactly what the hair of the Statue of Liberty must look like. It's mostly on the face and the fact that there is a torch and maybe the tablet. So I have a lot of flexibility at this point, which is nice. It's a good reprieve. Yeah, so this contour, so I'll draw some thick lines indicating the direction of the hair. I'm drawing it thickly because it's deep in shadow. And then I'll draw just a few hints of the hair there. So it's abbreviated, but yeah, I'm not necessarily going for hyperrealism with any of this. I want the lighting to come through, and that really is the most important part. Okay, and then there's this strand, or maybe a ribbon or something that comes out like that. It's darker down here. It lightens up quite a bit towards, yeah, just behind the ear. That's right, this is the ear, it's not, so draw some very dark shadows behind the ear, under the ear, try to give some indication that this is an ear. And actually I've hit the main beats on the face as it is, and at this point I'm actually kind of hesitant to make too many modifications to the face. So maybe I'll draw some subtle shadows where the face is more in relatively at an, you know, it's it's not reflecting sunlight. It would be like this if it was reflecting sunlight. It's more parallel to the rays of the sun, so it's going to look a lot darker, or look relatively dark. So that's what I'm shading in here. And notice that with the blending stump, I used up the graphite that was on there in the darkest parts of the face, and then I moved the blending stump towards the lighter parts of the face. So I'm still leaving tiny hints of shading, but not as much as I'm intentionally doing it so that it's so I'm not leaving anywhere near as much as I might have otherwise. Yeah, so to give hints that there are these hair strands, I can kind of add in these shadows at the bottom of that hair part that shoots out a little bit. The shadows shoot out a little bit, and that kind of indicates that there's some kind of ridge that's casting a shadow. And that's something, like, that's a good way to abbreviate hair. Okay. Then for the nose, the front portion of the nostrils has a darker shadow. And for the eye, to here, that inner part of the eye towards the bridge is darker. Here I'm intentionally drawing very, very subtle contours to give that illusion of three-dimensional form. Okay, so this eye now looks like the two dark spots give the eye a little bit of depth. And then the outer edge, I've made it a bit too, just a touch, just barely too dark, so I want to soften that out there. I'll darken that portion a little bit. Okay. This is a very delicate portion of the portrait. But yeah, already you can see how barely I touched the paper there, just how little time I spent on it. It's because sometimes less is more. I'm sure you've experienced this if you do any kind of sketching or drawing. Yeah, but here, a little counts for a lot, especially again, like with the size of the face that's being drawn on this particular piece of paper. It is very, very hard to get things just right. Okay. And then this portion of the face is deeper in shadow, so I need to make this a bit more, cut off a little bit more there. And I'll give some hints as to the direction of the hair, just like that. Okay, so okay, good. That takes care of the hair. And for the mouth, yeah, this is really hard because there's hair behind the chin, and the chin is a completely different. Let me just try this. So we made that chin part drop down too far. So I'm just correcting it here. And then I'm just gonna actually put this in shadow because yeah, okay, so I'm artificially going to introduce a contour, like an edge here. To make that chin stand out a bit more. And right now the bottom of the chin looks really flat. So I want to try and give it a bit more volume. So I'm going to try and maybe blend this side a little bit. So it still looks a bit flat, but that's also the fact that I haven't blended here. Okay, so I think, yeah, so that gives a bit more volume. Maybe not quite as much as I might like. And I'm actually so terrified of messing this up that I'm gonna leave this mostly as it is, because frankly, if someone doesn't understand that this is the Statue of Liberty at this point, then something has gone terribly wrong. Yeah. So this is definitely distinct from a lot of portraits that I've done where maybe if I'm drawing a person, I need to be much more careful than I am now. But the nice thing is that the Statue of Liberty has so many other defining features that I can take a few liberties. Okay. Yeah, that's not bad at all. Okay. Yep, we got through it. We got through it. That was only a little bit terrifying. I'm just noticing this portion can be rounded out a little bit. It's also in shadow. And these harder edges here denote they just mark they give a sense of a bit of depth on the thorns. So I blend the rest of the thorns a little bit more uniformly. You can see that the dark line that I drew here is a bit thicker than the dark line I drew here, not just because the picture shows it, but it then shows you that at this angle, this edge we can see the edge more clearly than this edge, which is more angled, so it's flatter towards us. And then this last one, it's almost perfectly uniformly one color. I don't want to have an edge with a drastically different color. So I'm just tapering off the edges. I'm just kind of like sanding it down almost until it's much closer to a single uniform color. Extend that a tiny bit so that I can erase it. Okay, and then this, the top of this sky, yeah, definitely can be a lot lower than how I'm drawing it. Okay, so that might need adjustments later, but I think good enough for now. I could sand this down a little bit more. Yeah, so that might need adjustments, but okay, that's good. And then this guy has a light edge on one side, but I'll kind of hint at that by drawing a very slight line close to the edge, but not quite at the edge. Yeah, so that'll give, you know, not the best indication, but something. Because it's all also, the goal here is also about the cumulative effect. It's not just about getting every single individual detail right. It's about how the small, subtle contributions add to the bigger picture. Okay, and this one I'll just, yeah, do that. And draw a very slight, oops, yeah, very gentle edge. Okay. And then for the cloth, actually, to be honest, I was thinking about doing a lot of blending, but I think I can actually draw a lot of this and be kind of bold with it. So I'll do a 4B, and then let's see. So it's very dark in this region. I'll do a lot of straight, kind of bold lines, a lot bolder than maybe I'd want to be, but here I'm willing to take more of a risk because it's cloth. There's a lot of layers, and if you draw the lines right, the details of the lines end up not mattering as much as the collective kind of illusion they give. But yeah, if you draw them right, they'll generate a very nice illusion. So the only places where I won't do kind of these harsher, thick lines is where the cloth kind of folds in on itself. Let's see, halfway. And I'll go through with a little bit of a blending stump and add some more, just very slight subtle gradients. But already, like, you can just see by the density of the lines and the orientation of the lines that we already have this sense of gravity pulling on this garment. And the one more thing, yeah, so there's a garment that this toga-like thing has some volume over here. Some of the garment back here is under shadow, so I'm going to draw that in. I'm noticing that this line is kind of breaking the illusion a bit, so I'm going to erase that, the top portion of that, and then add a few lines that come in from over the horizon. Yeah, that'll aid in the illusion. And then in addition to the thicker lines here, there are also lots of very small, subtle lines and creases. But we can just kind of go through and add those in as needed. Okay. Yeah, so this portion gives some sense of the fact that there's a bicep there. A lot of this cloth is giving the sense of having, it's kind of hanging off of the Statue of Liberty, hopefully, it's giving that illusion. And it will look a bit better with the blending stump. So we'll give that a second. Yeah, because right now it does look a bit flat, but we will rectify that. Also, this portion is under shadow more so than the other places. Yeah, this is under more shadow. Yeah. Okay, and there is a very dark crease that goes down here. Okay, so this also it's an isolation, so the illusion of depth will be aided when I get to this next part of the clothing, because a lot of this is in light, and so that'll stick out a lot, and then any parts here that are also lighter are going to stick out that much more as I add contrast. Okay, so here first there's a lot of clothing in shadow. Okay, so this one I can definitely spend a little bit more time on, just because it's such a well-defined feature of the statue that it's going to only help to draw the shadows more carefully there. So maybe I'll start doing that now. Because all the stuff around it, I can almost kind of sketch it, like this guy. It's like this. And we have some clothing where the fabric kind of tightens up here and then loosens up. There we go. There we go. And this part of the fabric, it's multi-layered, but this ending point is connected to, like it's kind of like that. And then there's some, let's see, all the way up here, I think, yeah. And the tablet. For this, I'm gonna use a ruler to trace out the tablet. There's no reason to make this any more difficult than it has to be. Okay, so the tablet ends right around here. that's going to be close enough. Yeah. And I'll just have to draw a parallel line. Was that done correctly? Yeah, that's done correctly. Let's see. Okay, that's not quite as steep there. Oh, that actually goes a little bit lower. Halfway down. Wow, okay. Yeah, eyeing things is really hard. It takes I'm told it takes a long time to develop that skill. I can see why. Yeah, so where that part of the tablet ends, I'm going to have to figure that out, but at least we have some clear boundary to work with. Actually, this is really bad. Yeah, I traced to the wrong line. Oops. Yeah, that makes more sense. Makes a lot more sense. Okay, so that angle looks better. Wow, there's a lot of volume being described by some of these contours here. So this line kind of wraps under, along with these guys that curve and kind of wrap under. There's a lot going on there. Yeah. There we go. Okay, and then the garment here has a lot of folds. It's kind of hard to see exactly how it shakes out, but I'll give it an approximation. Yeah, okay. And here we have like a wedge-shaped shadow with a harsh tapering shadow. I don't know the actual term for these things, but that's just how I would describe these things. Okay, shadow there. And this shadow kind of wraps around and closes up. Just make these more well-defined. Okay, so so there's some sense that there's a lot of pulling here. This is resting, this is resting, this is more recessed. And then this, I'll make sure that the light values are consistent with the reference image I'm using. Yeah, this is not bad at all. Not bad at all. Okay, and for this portion, this needs a 6B, and a lot of parts in very, very dark shadow right around here. That'll kind of becomes lighter. And then there are some hints of cloth that look kind of like that. That'll be enough for what we're doing. And the hand. Bottom part of the hand is kind of like that. So here I'm letting the shading, at least the preliminary shading, inform the volume. Okay, and this hand will require a lot more thought. And then for the blending, I'll do some blending and pause, take a break for today. The blending is going to be darkest here. And parts that are sort of kind of a mix of shadow, mix of harsh edges and stark light portions. Then we have this twist in the cloth. This part's kind of in shadow. Okay, more mix of harsh and light, or harsh and smooth. Okay, and then here's, yeah, this part's relatively dark. And then a lot of this is bathed in light. So I'm now letting the graphite run out, and then just adding some subtle shading where I think it's needed. Here I'm picking up some graphite again. But I'll keep the graphite to the regions that need the most shading. Okay, so that's probably good. So this portion is just a little bit less in light. I'll do kind of a crosshatch just to get it out of the way. This portion is, yeah, you need to be careful with the shading here, just because again there's so much volume captured in this portion. Yeah. Yeah, I'd definitely be able to do a better job of the clothing here. But I'll decide on if I like how much I want to refine it or not next time. But yeah, there you go. Here's how things look so far. Not bad.